and here with anti-conspiracy theorist Toby Young. Coming up, Biden has gone, but where to? Has anyone seen him? Will Kamala Harris be the nominee, and how bad will that be? Plus, as America bursts into flames metaphorically, Leeds does so literally with the riots. And as ever, you can get the full extended podcast on basedmedia.org for just £5 a month. Plus, of course, Weekly Sceptic Live is coming up July 29th. So go to eventbrite.co.uk to get your tickets now, or they're also on basedmedia.org. Toby, anything to add to that?
Just to urge people to come to our live show, which I think is going to be a really good one. I'm hoping that we're going to hear impressions of Gareth Southgate, Tucker Carlson, Donald Trump, Keir Starmer, maybe even Kamala Harris from you, Nick. So it'll be an impression bonanza. But it's going to be really good. It's at Lola's, the downstairs bar, at the Hippodrome. It's next Monday. Curtain, it's like doors open at 6:30, curtain up at 7. It's a 2-hour show. Tickets are only 25 quid. You can get them. You can go to basemedia.org, click on events, go to dailyskeptic.org, click on the banner at the top of the page, or as Nick said, eventbrite.co.uk, Google that and the Weekly Sceptic, you'll find the tickets. Yeah, it's going to be a fantastic show. Do come along, and if you want to have a drink with us afterwards, for £75, you can come and have a drink with Nick and me in the Hippodrome's exclusive rooftop bar. First drink free.
Yes, and we never know if we'll do another Weekly Sceptic Live, so come along. And also, we're taking a summer break after the live show, so it's the last chance for a little while to get your dose of Weekly Sceptic. So we're taking a couple of weeks off, so after the live show. So you should also note that. And if you want to get my other stuff, go to nickdixon.net. We just had a brilliant episode of The Current Thing with Lord Frost, so you can go to nickdixon.net for that. And you can go to buymeacoffee.com/nickdixon to support me on there. Anything else you want to add, Toby, before we go into Biden?
No, just check out my new podcast, The Skeptic, at dailyskeptic.org. It drops every Thursday morning, and it's working out really well. The presenter is Laurie Wastel, has 3 interviews on it, sometimes a 4th for premium subscribers. So check that out on dailyskeptic.org, and you can go to the podcast link at the top in the main menu bar. You can find it.
Since when did you start saying things like drops, Toby? When did you get so hip? All right, that's the promotion out of the way. Sorry about that. We have to do that. So let's get to the big story, which, of course, Joe Biden has dropped out. And he dropped out with a very strange message on Twitter only, a screenshot of a letter with weird capitalizations of the word nation, which no one understood. Why did he only make the announcement on Twitter is a big question. He didn't endorse Kamala Harris, as we're apparently supposed to pronounce it, even though that's obviously just how Americans talk. Someone on the BBC was saying it was Kamala. He didn't endorse Kamala, I think I'll call her. But then he did suddenly in a weird follow-up tweet. It was weird that they didn't go in the same tweet, basically. That was very strange. Now, as we record, and things are moving very fast, so who knows how this will age. As we record on Tuesday, there's rumors that he's ill, that he's had a stroke, that in fact he had one a while ago on Air Force One, a mini stroke, and that, now he may have had another stroke. That's pure rumors at this point. Other people saying, is he alive? He did this call in. Some people saying, was it AI? I don't think it was AI, but he did a call in to Kamala, but it sounded recorded. And there's a moment where Kamala says, thanks for being on, something words to the effect of this call, Joe. She starts to say recording and then says call. That's what it sounds like. Who knows? It's just Kamala just being dumb. But it was this weird, he did sound like he didn't stop for the applause and things like that. So it's like, was it a call or was it a pre-recorded call? And does that matter? Where is he? What's going on? Very, very strange. Is it a coup? So many questions, Toby. Start with any of those.
Yeah, well, it's, I'm as you introduced me, I think, as the anti-conspiracy theorist. And as you know, I'm much more of a cock-up theory of history guy. But it's hard to get cross with any conspiracy theorists for speculating about exactly what's going on with Biden's announcement, because everything about it is so odd. Typically you'd expect a president who decides at this late juncture not to be the Democratic nominee, having been the Democratic nominee right up until this point, you'd expect him to make that announcement at a press conference and to anoint his vice president as the candidate, his preferred candidate, at the same press conference. That would be the conventional thing to do, to address the American people and explain his decision. This is a very odd way of going about it. And you mentioned a couple of the odd things. So it was done in the form of a letter rather than, an actual announcement. The letter wasn't on White House headed paper, which again is atypical. It was posted on X. I thought the Biden White House now hated X now that it's owned by Elon Musk and not by people that will do their bidding. That's very odd. Why not give it to the New York Times? It was as though it was rushed out and a little bit chaotic. The signature is not his usual signature, has this weird underlined bit. And as you say, it was odd that if he was going to endorse Kamala, that he didn't do it in his original statement, but had to do it in a follow-up statement 15 minutes later. I mean, it does begin to feel like some kind of palace coup, and that he's sort of essentially kind of lost the power to kind of make decisions like this now, and so someone was essentially making it for him. He's been praised for making this heroic decision, putting the country first, typical of the man and his record of public service, blah, blah, blah. But actually, it turns out that he said a few things subsequently to suggest that he did it very reluctantly and, more or less had a gun at his head, being held by Nancy Pelosi. That's not a great metaphor, because if Nancy Pelosi is even older than Biden, right, had a gun at your head, I wouldn't feel at all comfortable. The trigger might have got off accidentally. But anyway, she'd said, we either do it, the nice way or the hard way, and he'd been given this weekend to make up his mind, supposedly, according to the Politico story. But even that Politico story was full of kind of weird contradictions. So the whole thing is very odd, very atypical, and it's not surprising that people are speculating about what's really going on. And Biden could put a lot of this speculation to rest, including the speculation about whether he's had a stroke, whether he's still alive. At one stage, "Is Biden dead?" was out trending "Donate to Kamala" on Twitter. But he could put to bed some of these more kind of wild rumors by just giving a press conference and answering some questions. But the fact that he's gone missing just adds to all the kind of wild speculation. So on their own heads, let these conspiracy theories be, because they couldn't have done more to encourage conspiracy theorists to start kind of theorizing about what the hell is going on.
Yeah, and by the time this comes out, who knows? He might be dead. He might have been revealed to be a hologram. Things are moving very fast. And on that point, Kimberly Cheatle has just resigned as we record. We were going to talk about her later. Finally, she's resigned. I mean, it took an awful lot. It took that absolutely horrific testimony, which you may have seen clips of. We'll talk about that a bit later, but she's now gone. And so who knows what will be happening with Biden by the time this comes out, even though it's only a day later that we release it. But just quickly before I get into it, and Toby, actually, I wanted to pick you up on one thing, which is maybe this is controversial, but you are the anti-conspiracy theorist. I was thinking about this. We knew what James was going to say about the Trump assassination attempt immediately, that it was a setup, and lo and behold, he did. And we also knew what you were going to say, that it was definitely cock-up. And of course, he did. And so to me, I'm the only one with the open mind to see what it could be. Maybe we should get into that later when we talk about the shooter. But then I've just accused you of something there. But even you are almost cracking with this Biden thing. I mean, there's been a picture, a little video of him coming out of a car. So but he is through
him being Biden.
Biden, yeah. There's sort of he's just in a car, and it's hard to see what's going on. So that's not particularly useful. As you say, why doesn't he just come out? Maybe he will have come out by the time this is released. But it kind of reminds me of Kate, Princess Catherine. There was all this speculation. I didn't really go in for the speculation there. But on this one, it's very hard not to, as you say, because it's all so dodgy. There's quite an interesting thing from Colin Rugg here. Biden was, and you mentioned already, Biden was blackmailed into dropping out of the race after top Democrats threatened to remove him from office with the 25th Amendment, according to the New York Post. It's becoming clear that the coup was a well-orchestrated plan by the Democrats. Biden's June debate appeared to be a setup so Democrats could forcibly remove Biden in time to get a new candidate. According to Politico, Nancy Pelosi threatened Biden if he refused to drop out of the race. Nancy made clear that they could do this the easy way or the hard way. She gave him 3 weeks of the easy way. It was about to be the hard way. I mean, then they're saying, does it even go back further? The plan, in 2020, Pelosi unveiled legislation that would allow Congress to intervene under the 25th Amendment to remove the president. She assured the public at the time the legislation was not for Trump. So who knows? They certainly wanted that option.
But if it was a coup, which I'm perfectly willing to entertain, it wasn't a well-orchestrated coup. It was a clumsy and chaotic coup. If it was well-orchestrated, it would have been a lot slicker than it actually was.
True. Yeah. Coup. The thing, this whole thing about was it a coup? I mean, it's kind of obvious it was anyway, because it depends on your definition of coup, right? I mean, Obama was posting things via Clooney allegedly, and then just as himself saying, "Yeah, I'm not sure Biden is up to it." I think Pelosi was being vague, and obviously they were moving against him and they were leaking things to the press, so they were pressuring him to leave, and the pressure was massive after the debate, and all the donors were pressurizing him. But you're talking about, I suppose, the differences between literally they've sort of done it themselves, what he's in a corner somewhere tied up, versus pressuring him to go.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like, and this was sort of the theme of the Politico story, which seemed like the best reported story about what happened so far, though by no means 100% accurate, but it looked as though there were different factions within the leadership of the Democratic Party, within the White House, within Biden's circle. And Jill and Hunter were urging him to stay in the race. He was inclined to stay in the race, and didn't want to capitulate to the Obamas because he still bears a grudge. Thinks he was, didn't get the nomination, dislikes Obama because of the way he was treated disrespectfully as Obama's VP, etc. But then there was another faction, and ultimately, the factions wanting him to leave triumphed. But it seems like, it wasn't clear until the very last minute which faction was going to emerge as the winner. And it's perfectly possible that, the faction that wanted him to go kind of cornered him and produced this kind of statement, which he may have only been kind of semi-aware of. But once that was out there, they'd put it on Twitter. And the suggestion is the fact that they didn't go through any of the normal channels, didn't talk to any reporters who probably would have wanted to check it, but just stuck it straight on Twitter. It was like they wanted it to be a fait accompli. They didn't want any possibility of Biden saying something else or there to be any confusion. They wanted to effectively, ambush the faction who wanted him to stay, including him and his immediate family, by getting that out there and making it official, which then allowing events to take their course, making it harder. That's how they won, effectively. They probably didn't get him to... he's probably not really in a kind of fit state to consent to anything, but they probably kind of cornered him, kind of ushered him into a kind of room off one of the main corridors in the White House, kind of presented him with this statement. He may have made a couple of minor revisions, probably didn't really know what he was doing, and then, stuck a digital signature on the end of it, and didn't even bother getting official headed paper, because that would have involved, going through some kind of formal process, which would have made it more difficult and less likely to succeed, would have needed too many people's approval and sign off. So it was all sort of rushed out. Now, that's the impression I get, that it was sort of one faction triumphing in this kind of Machiavellian way by just getting their resignation statement out there, albeit in this kind of very amateurish way, because they didn't have an alternative.
Right, we just hit send anyway. Yeah, and that brings up the question of, did Biden even know, which is the only one I didn't mention, that some people were saying he didn't even know about this statement. It's just on his Twitter. How do we know if he even knows that's out? And that is, that's very much on the coup side, but that's certainly possible.
You could imagine that the plotters thought an essential person to kind of enlist in the conspiracy, if you want to call it a conspiracy, is the person who controls Biden's X account. That's the essential person. It's like, in kind of, 50 years ago, the kind of wannabe African dictator would have to kind of secure the kind of main broadcast center as a way of kind of maximizing the chances of the coup succeeding. So they kind of, they capture, the Nigerian equivalent of the BBC and surround it with kind of troops loyal to the kind of would-be dictator. And then the would-be dictator comes on television and announces that he's now in charge, and that's kind of 90% of the coup succeeding. You've got to capture, the center of communications, broadcasting to the nation. The equivalent today is the person who controls the president's X account.
Or who just grabs the phone. Think about it. It was a screenshot. You have the screenshot ready. Someone grabs the phone out of Biden's hand. How hard can that be? Can barely defend himself. Someone texts the screenshot.
I don't think he's got it in his head. I don't think he's got it. You're imagining that
he's got it in his hand. No,
yeah,
his assistant's got
X
it.
account. No.
But let's say whoever's got the phone, you grab the phone, you send the screenshot to them. All they have to do is go tweet, attach screenshot, done. That takes seconds. Because that's even quicker than typing it out, which is why it was a screenshot. Yeah, you could do that in seconds without, and then it's out there. Then it's too late, isn't it? You can't go back on it and say, sorry, someone grabbed the phone. That's my theory. I just made that up on the spot, but I think it's correct.
Why do you think they kind of didn't include his endorsement of Kamala in the original statement? Was that just an oversight? Did they not want it to look as though she was, they were aligned with her, and it would have looked more like she was the assassin if he'd have endorsed her, in the initial statement, or had they not kind of secured her, and they wanted to kind of create some sense of momentum? So after, she was immediately sounded out after the statement dropped, and she said, "Yes, I'm willing to now,
No.
sort of officially throw him out." I don't know, what was that
No,
about?
it's simpler. As you say, it was rushed. They put out the statement. Then everyone started going, he does not endorse Harris. No, he hasn't endorsed Harris. And then they go, these amateurs that are doing it, oh shit, better endorse Harris.
Maybe.
And then they have to endorse Harris separately. Because there were so many tweets immediately saying he hasn't actually endorsed Harris. And they probably didn't realize they would be expected to do that. And they were just like, let's just get the resignation out there. We'll put nation with a capital N, which no one ever does. Bang, bang, bang. Out. Oh shit, we haven't endorsed Harris. Then they just do it as a separate tweet. I think it could be that stupid. Don't you think?
Yeah, quite possibly.
Or why do it as a separate tweet? Or Biden didn't want to on it. Or they had to persuade Biden. He didn't really. He didn't want to endorse. Like, fine, but I'm not endorsing that bitch. And then they put it out, and then they force him to. Or he didn't want it in his letter because he didn't want it to be about her, and they agreed to do it as a separate tweet. There's different possibilities. None of them are good.
Yeah, but
go on.
No, I was just thinking, what's that? Is it something razor? It's not Occam's razor, but razor. A different razor, which is it's like whatever the explanation is that means the people involved were just stupid. That's the most likely. So it sounds like what you've just suggested. It's kind of like generally why I'm a cock up.
Yeah, I'm not, but on this thing, on that little skirmish, I could easily imagine it. But there's so many questions. Laura Loomer's basically saying he's
Hanlon's razor. That's what it is. Hanlon's razor. Yeah.
Laura Loomer is saying he's dying and that he had this ischemic, the mini stroke. Anyway, I can't remember how you say it.
Yeah.
He had that on Air Force One a while ago, and that he's now dying. Here's another one breaking from 1 minute ago from Laura Loomer. Joe Biden will be addressing the public tomorrow about his decision to drop out of the race. Okay, so allegedly he's See, in that theory, Biden's just there at his beach house, whatever, going, I'm not going to address these people. Why should I, he's just like being as intransigent as possible because that's the only move he has left. They're like, get out and make a statement, Joe. He's like, no, just do a stupid tweet. And he's like just so distraught, but also just doesn't want to go along with the game. So he won't come out and say anything. They managed to force him to do this weird call into Harris and no one even knows if it's a pre-recording. Now they'll finally drag him out tomorrow by the sounds of it. But it's, all he had left was to just be stubborn, right? But it does bring up the question. I mean, if he is as ill as Laura Loomer says, that's different again. And depending on how rapidly that's become the case. But the big question is if he is unfit to be president, which is what he's essentially saying he's unfit to be the nominee, then why is he fit to be president? And of course, surely he isn't. Does that mean he'll just give it to Kamala Harris immediately? And what has he been doing for the last several months and years if he wasn't fit? Because the country he's been running the country, but how long was he unfit for? To the naked eye, it seems like an awful long time. Has ChatGPT just been running the country? You start to wonder. So what do you think? Will he immediately give it to Harris, and he'll just be the VP of Harris in a sense, or will it be just he'll be the nominal president, but she'll be doing most stuff, or whoever is actually running the country?
I would have thought the latter is the most likely, that he won't actually formally stand down as president and hand over the reins to her, much though she'd like that. I imagine it will be just she takes on more and more responsibility.
Isn't it stronger for them if she goes in as an incumbent and just already president?
Yeah.
Hey, she's already the president. Doesn't that make and nothing terrible happens in a few months, which it might, but doesn't that make her much stronger as a candidate going in?
I think. I'm not sure she can do anything to kind of shore up her chances. She looks like just completely hopeless. I mean, we're going to get on to talk about her now.
Kamala, yeah, it can do. I mean, what's it going to be like with Kamala?
I mean, I think one helpful thing about the manner in which Biden has effectively resigned and handed over to Kamala is that it gives the lie to the Democrats claiming that they care about protecting democracy and that they care more than the Republicans about the integrity of the democratic process. And that's supposedly the kind of entire rationale behind the censorship industrial complex, to protect the integrity of the democratic process from bad actors. We have to take these unusual steps to defend democracy. It's like, well, what could be less democratic than the manner in which, first of all, the guy who is notionally the president is clearly unfit to be the president. So, well, who's in charge then? And how do you square that with democracy? Because the elected person was Biden. And then the manner in which Kamala's been selected as the candidate. There's supposed to be a primary process. She hasn't stood in. I think she was a candidate in 2000, but dropped out before there was a vote. So she's never received a single vote from a registered Democrat in any primary. She's essentially a diversity hire. And for her to be kind of finally find herself as the Democratic presidential nominee, having won no contests at all, doesn't strike me as particularly democratic, and I think it'll make it difficult for the Democrats to argue that they are the guardians of our democracy in future. I mean, they just look like a joke of a party.
One thing that might have been incorrect there, Toby, and I could be wrong, is that she did receive some votes, but hardly any, because I know Michael Knowles was naming a couple of candidates who received more votes than Harris in the primary, and there were people you've never even heard of. But I've been trying to find this out in the last couple of days. It's hard because everything's now, they memory hold it, and it's all become about the new candidacy.
Well, she ran. I mean, she ran for office. The only time she's run for office, I think, was in 2010 when she ran for Attorney General of California, and all the Democratic candidates in various different offices won in 2010, but she won by the smallest margin. So Jerry Brown won by 13 points. Barbara Boxer defeated her Republican opponent for the Californian Senate seat by 10 points. Kamala defeated her Republican rival by 0.8%. And this was in California. I think apart from that, I think, I don't think she's entered an electoral contest apart from in 2000.
In 2020. You're saying she didn't...
But was she initially the candidate in 2020 and then dropped out?
Well, she was one of them in the primaries, right? I don't fully understand the American system that well, but
she ran in 2020, but she dropped out before a single state had voted, before the Iowa primary. And she was polling just over 1% when she quit. Okay,
well, anyway, and tell that to LBC, because there was a guy calling in today. You know how they like to call everyone racist, and they were going, "How can you say she's just a diversity hire? You know, she's an attorney." They're already saying her record's amazing, even though her record's obviously rubbish. She's got this controversy about her relationship with Willie Brown that she hates it when people bring that up. He was like 60 and she was in her 20s, and there's all that stuff. So it's probably going to be, and like you say, the main point is this democracy thing. One of the main points, they can't claim to be the party of democracy, talk about threats to democracy, when they've clearly just gone full oligarchy. The mask has come off. They've revealed what it's all about in a Schmittian terms. So if you're a fan of elite theory, Carl Schmitt would talk about this in terms of the exception. He had this famous phrase, "Sovereign is he who decides on the exception, That was from political theology. What he meant was that the power always comes up with an exception to the alleged rules and then just justifies it in a post hoc way. So we see this here. We go, oh, it's all about democracy, unless we want to dump the president and with a screenshot, and then we can. Why? Because we're in power, and that's what we've just done. So that's the reality of power, and a lot of people are now seeing it. Curtis Yarvin had a very interesting Substack on this. He's saying it's not that you're in a movie; it's that you were in a movie and now you're in actual history. So people have had this feeling, many people, that, oh, what are we in now? The world is so chaotic. Crazy things are happening. Assassination attempts, deposed presidents, all within days. What are we? But his theory was that you were living in the illusion before, I suppose, in the 90s kind of end of history era. But now you're actually in history, and this is what it's like, and get used to it. And by the way, democracy is an illusion, and you may as well just admit that we have a monarchy. This is his thing. So it is looking very much like that. And some other points. What will it be like with Kamala? What will she campaign on? Well, it's going to be a load of stuff about being a black woman, obviously. That's virtually all she's got. It's going to be about sometimes being a black woman, sometimes just being a woman. And she can hit Trump on he's a misogynist. She can hit him on abortion, which was a weak point, as we know, in some of the midterms and so on. It's all going to be about abortion and being a woman. And we're going to see...
And immigration as well, because she was Biden's immigration czar. And how many illegals have entered the country in the last 3 and a bit years?
She's very weak on that, because she didn't even go to the border, did she? She was in trouble for not even bothering with the border.
Well, I imagine the Trump campaign will hang that round her neck. I mean, something to look forward to, Nick. The vice presidential debate between her and J.D. Vance. That's going to be fantastic.
If she is vice,
we'll talk about inequality of arms.
But people are talking about who will be her vice, which is complicated as well.
It'll be her versus Trump now, won't it? That'll be even better. But she's got to pick her vice presidential candidate, hasn't she? Yeah.
Yeah, be her versus Trump, and she's got to pick vice. And people are talking about this. I don't know many of these people really, but there's Roy Cooper is one, Josh Shapiro, who I had heard of, Andy Bashir, and there's a few other ones. And there's all these. We don't even know a lot. I mean, Shapiro is fairly well known. Josh Shapiro, some of them are well known-ish, but yeah, they're going to be kind of completely new people to most of the public, and it's going to be a lot on abortion, as I've said, a lot on the women thing. I already saw Richard Bacon, not that he's like a particular known commentator on American politics, but he was already coming out saying, she's a woman, she's relatively young, and how amazing it is. There's just going to be loads of this kind of thing. And one really funny thing is that they're suddenly going to start pushing how Trump is old, having said that Biden is super sharp for the last X years. Oh, age is not a thing. He's super sharp. They're going to suddenly say, Trump's old. They're already doing it because Kamala's merely 60. They're already saying that Trump's just ancient and out of it, whereas Kamala's so young. That is one thing she's got going for her. She looks quite good. She does have some energy. She's not as old as some of the others. And she has a kind of charisma. I'm going to be really generous and say she has a kind of charisma. Obviously, she's got the absurd laugh, but she has a kind of charisma to her. Obviously, the downsides are no beliefs, basically no content, no good record, hardly anyone, no one's voted for her in the past, questionable background, the Willie Brown thing. What about some potential nicknames, Toby? Trump's been going with Laughing Kamala, and in a post the other day, he called her dumb as a rock, in inverted commas, as if it was a well-known phrase. I was thinking Crazy Kamala, but that's already been used on Crazy Nancy. You've got this sort of coconut line where she's talked about coconut, but if you start calling her Kamala Coconut, you're obviously getting racial connotations, so that can't really work. You've got the unburdened line might be an angle, but it's a bit niche. Desperate Kamala, I was thinking of, is quite good because she's desperate because it's like a last-minute replacement, and also it's got a kind of sexual implication because there's rumors that she sort of slept her way to the top and all that. Maybe unfair rumors, but desperate Kamala, Laughing Kamala, Mad Kamala. What do you think?
Yeah, I haven't got to think of nicknames for her, but she's.
Well, have a think because that's important.
She's not. I wouldn't say she's charismatic. I mean, she has this when she says she does this kind of weird thing with her hands when she says what can be
unburdened
by what has been. She kind of she points and she points.
She's pointing into the past.
I get that, but it's she's a beyond hopeless public speaker, and she can't think on her feet, and she kind of has these stop phrases. She kind of falls back on, or rather, one stop phrase she constantly falls back on. Is she such a poor public? I mean, I guess there are a couple of things. It could be that we're just seeing the very worst of it. The people have pulled these clips together of just, her worst moments. And so if that's all you've seen of her, you get the impression that she's just beyond hopeless. Maybe she's made some good speeches, which we just haven't seen. Maybe the reason, maybe actually what we're seeing isn't wildly unrepresentative. And the reason she's so poor is because she's supposedly a bit of a bully and gets through her staff quite quickly. They kind of, there's a high turnover amongst Kamala's staff.
She's unburdened by staff.
She's unburdened by staff because they all do a runner after working for her for a few weeks. Maybe she just can't get a decent speechwriter because she's so unpleasant to work for.
I'm unburdened by manners and being nice. Yeah, unburdened by manners. I mean, yeah, her speeches are unbelievable. I don't believe there's a secret cachet of amazing speeches they're not showing us for some reason, unless they're about to unveil them. But yeah, we're going to have all the puff pieces and all the kind of the rebrand of Kamala. We're going to have all the fashion magazines and how she's so great and young and amazing.
We're about to. It's one rather satisfying thing about it is that clearly the reason Biden picked her, I think he may have even been upfront about this, is because he wanted a black female running mate as his vice presidential candidate. So she was, a diversity hire. That's crystal clear. He certainly didn't pick someone who had, the most ability. Merit played a very distant third or fourth to the other considerations. She has to have ovaries. She has to be a person of color. So having kind of foisted himself with such a weak running mate, the Democrats are now being hoisted on their own petard. I mean, they have no choice but to go with the diversity pick as their presidential candidate. And it's just, I mean, it'll be another nail in the coffin of DEI. We're running a story about this in the Daily Sceptic, and my headline is "Live and Let DEI." But it looks like a contributory factor to Trump's now nailed-on landslide victory is going to be that the Democrats ended up running with a diversity hire as their presidential candidate. And like Boeing, they're going to fall out of the sky.
Well, yeah, I mean, and we can get into later Kimberly Cheatle, the ultimate diversity hire, but are they definitely going to go with Kamala Toby? We also want to check this because there was a moment where it looked like there were rumors that Hillary was going to come back, and that would have been crazy. I mean, imagine Hillary comes back. There's nothing she wouldn't do to lose again. I mean, it'd be very worrying. I mean, she would never accept losing another election. And that was quite worrying to me that we'd have Hillary back. But that seemed to quickly fall apart because she endorsed Harris very quickly. Obama seemed less inclined to endorse her. So there was still rumors that Big Mike was in the wings somewhere, our friend Big Mike. And the other obvious person is American Psycho. Some people have been mentioning Newsom, but he's not really been talked about much since this Kamala explosion. It seems to just be.
And I think he's now endorsed Kamala.
Right.
I think hasn't.
So yeah, there was
Newsom,
all these rumors it could have been any of these, and that was for a moment that was interesting, but that very quickly seemed to fall apart, and they are just going to go. Do you really think they will just 100% go with Harris?
It looks that way. It looks like she's going to be hard to stop now. Have the Obamas definitely endorsed her?
Well, last I checked, it was still quite vague, and they hadn't. And they seem to be just
George Clooney. I think the latest person to endorse her is George Clooney.
Well, if he has, then that is Obama. I mean,
a mouthpiece for Obama.
Yeah.
Then, yeah.
What a weird thing to be, George Clooney. As a kid, you think he's like reasonably smart and like a good actor. And you get older and you realize, oh, he's just a weird puppet for Obama. He's just like a good-looking puppet who they literally write. I mean, Peter Mandelson even said they write his articles for him. That's a shocking thing to just admit.
Yeah. It's like Gareth Southgate and Alistair Campbell. So one reason why I think it's likely to be, one reason I think she's unlikely to be deposed at the Democratic convention next month is because supposedly there's this $100 million campaign war chest, and she has to be the name on the ticket. Otherwise, they can't get access to this war chest. They'd have to give the money back. So, it would have to be a rival candidate who thought they could raise serious amounts of money and to persuade the Democratic Party that they'd have a better chance than her. So I think that kind of locks her in as the candidate.
Okay. Yeah, it's all very complicated. Whether some people say she's it's not even legal. But I can't even get into all that. I don't understand American politics enough. People will start to say that she's amazing. I mean, the idea is she's a weak candidate. We'll soon see people being like, I've just seen that Ed Krasenstein person who seems to post a lot on X talking about what a great public speaker she is. This is all the kind of gaslighting we're about to have. What a great opening campaign speech by Kamala Harris. She really is great at speaking. Definitely the best speaking candidate since Barack Obama. I can't wait till she debates Trump. I mean, this woman who just talked utter nonsense. We are in the context of time, but we're also in the context of everybody who is, just always pure nonsense.
Yeah.
We're going to be told she's an amazing speaker.
Word salad.
We're going to be told that she's a feminist icon and blah, 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 and that she's brilliant. And they're just going to hammer her so... Because as Vivek said, we're up against the whole system. You're not up against the candidate. You're up against a system. Trump has to survive an assassination attempt. You've got to get through rigged elections. You've got to do all sorts of things. But they've just got to put up any dummy and just make them say the things. And they've got the whole deep state on their side. So it's an incredibly tough battle, whoever you get. Certainly.
Do you think that the mainstream media will just weigh in behind Kamala? I keep pronouncing it differently every time I say it. Are we going to stick with Kamala, or are we going to say Kamala?
I don't know.
You're going with Kamala, right?
Well, I think it sounds better as a northern. I mean, there was this woman saying it's actually, if you look in her book, it's Kamala. But the thing about that is that's how Americans speak. They say vowels in a different way. They say things like Kamala, but they say lots of things in a weird way, don't they?
Kamala, yeah.
So,
and we would say,
if it was,
would you say? I mean, are there any Kamalas up north? You're just thinking of Pamela.
I'm just thinking of how we say vowel sounds. Of course, there aren't any Kamalas. It's not even a name, is it? No one knows if it's actually a name. Nigel Farage was in trouble for saying a black African, wasn't he, on LBC? But to me, he obviously meant African American and just forgot to say the last bit. And everyone's like, oh, Farage is racist. I mean, I've been on TV and said adoption when I meant abortion, or vice versa. And you say these things on live TV and you don't always realize. So that was nothing. But yeah, we've got the pronunciation issue. It's going to be annoying. Go on.
Anyway, I was going to say, do we really think the mainstream media is going to just weigh in foursquare behind her? Are they not now so embarrassed for having kind of tried to poo-poo stories about Biden's unfitness for office that they'll try and recover some credibility and self-respect by actually properly scrutinizing all the candidates and not being so openly partisan?
Oh, it's going to be awful, I think. There was a piece by Grace Curley in The Spectator, I guess maybe the US Spectator, talking about how just pathetically they're going to get behind her. And I really think it will be very much like that. I'm just looking for a really good, it was a really good paragraph she had, but I'll find it in a second. There's going to be, here we go. So the media and the Democrats are set to invent a new version of Harris and force it down the throats of the American people. You weren't supposed to believe your eyes about Biden for 4 years. Surely the left can get you to buy their latest batch of lies for 106 days. Now that she says, now that the Biden is a Socratic thinker era has officially ended, the same people who privately cringed at Kamala's word salad and lack of political savviness are desperate. And you know what they say, desperation is the momola of invention. Yeah, because Drew Barrymore called her momola. There's just going to be, she's got more on this. There's just going to be loads and loads of sudden, oh, she's so great. We're going to have to pretend that she's brilliant. And it's going to be absolutely painful. So, yeah, but I wouldn't rule out, it's not an easy win. Some people are saying it was an easy win for Trump. Notice how quickly they've almost sort of memory hold the assassination attempt. To some degree, they've distracted with this Biden thing. The Cheatle trial was all a bit of distraction. Now the Cheatle resignation. We're meant to kind of forget about that. And it does already feel like quite a long time ago. They're going to go straight back into Trump's awful and evil. Kamala's amazing and a beautiful feminist woman. Trump wants to kill babies. Some people point out Kamala Harris has no children. That might be a negative for her. I know J.D. Vance has had that controversial thing where he talked about childless cat ladies in the Democrat Party. So that could be an issue, having no children and no stake in the future. I don't know if they'll go there because they're already going to be in trouble for being misogynist.
How do you think it will affect Trump's support amongst African Americans? Do you think African American women will now be more likely to vote Democrat, and African American men will be unmoved by Kamala being the candidate?
That's exactly what I think, because black women are the only demographic that Kamala does well amongst. That's why they never put her as a serious candidate before they had to. She does well with black women, but basically no one else. And Trump, as we know, has suddenly got this black vote. Some will stick with Kamala amongst black men, but I agree with you. I think a lot of black men have come over to Trump now and won't go back. But black women will go for Kamala, and other women will go with Kamala. we need to stop women voting, Toby. I mean, I hate to say it. Repeal the 19th. That's what Trump should have done. He needs to get in and do that day one, because they will vote for Kamala because they just don't like Trump, and they say, oh, he's a misogynist. I mean, even though she's got absolutely nothing to her. And can you imagine for a minute Kamala Harris dealing with Putin or dealing with President Xi, or any of these international conflicts and international diplomacy? I mean, you can imagine Trump dealing with Putin like, hey, Vlad, we got to end this war. It's got to end, or I bomb Moscow. Tell me you got till 3:00. You could easily see it. You're a smart guy, but I'm going to have to bomb Moscow. That could easily happen. Kamala Harris, like, hey, Vlad, she's got that famous clip where she's like, Ukraine is a country. Russia is a bigger country. Have you seen that clip? It's a famous, it's so dumb. Yeah. It reminded me very much, for Succession fans, of Connor Roy at Mo Lester's funeral when the biographer's there and he doesn't want her to get any information. And he's going, Lester was a man. He has now died. That is sad. He's his wife is so-and-so. She is now sad. And it's just like, that is Kamala talking about Ukraine. Ukraine is a country.
Yeah.
And Russia is a bigger country.
And Russia invaded Ukraine, and that is bad.
That is bad.
That is bad.
Now we are sad. I know. Imagine her dealing with Putin. It's so absurd.
The Babylon Bee had quite a funny video about Kamala's 6-year-old speechwriter, and they kind of got this boy who looked about 6 to wear a suit and kind of tip-tap away at a keyboard and pretend to be her speechwriter, and they had him talking about how he'd written that speech about
I remember that one.
Russia and Ukraine. It was funny.
Yeah, that was very good. Babylon Bee's been on fire lately. Yeah, it's hard to keep up.
I mean, yeah, it's really
Secret
good.
Service director resigns in disgrace for failing to assassinate Trump. That's their latest.
It's a good one. I'm surprised President Xi hasn't invaded Taiwan already. I mean, this would be
great time.
The moment, surely. Yeah. I think I agree with you. It's if he does wait until after the presidential election, it's certainly less likely to happen if Trump is in the White House than if Kamala is in the White House. Yeah, I don't think she's gonna instill fear in America's enemies.
I know, it's terrifying, and people are stupid enough to vote for it. I wouldn't rule anything out. Toby, do you want to quickly do our advert before we move on to Kimberly Cheatle?
Yep. So this is an ad from our steadfast and loyal supporter, Thor Holt. I'd love to connect with you, my fellow skeptic, and yet at the time of writing, while 192,000 people had read my recent LinkedIn post titled, Why Don't You Buy a Tesla for the Tax Break, Thor? And 421 people had left a comment, sadly for me, you, my dear fellow skeptic, you haven't connected with me on LinkedIn yet. What gives? The most consistent feedback I get is that my LinkedIn content, written or video, is 100% authentic and a highlight of their LinkedIn feed. Nothing to sell, but everything to give. And I'll give you my all, pretty much every day on LinkedIn, my dear skeptic. So please connect with me there. LinkedIn.com/in/ThorHolt. Don't just hit follow, hit connect, and tell me you found me through the Weekly Sceptic, because I want to have a reason to keep supporting the free speech mission of this show. See you there, linkedin.com/in/ThorHolt after the show. And remember, be a connector and not a follower.
Thanks to Thor. And more breaking news, Jimmy Carter has now passed away. So an awful lot happening. And I want to apologize to listeners. So much is happening. It's hard to keep up with. And simultaneously, I'm waiting for a delivery of a bed, which was supposed to come 2 hours ago. So I'm in that horrible state where you're just on edge waiting for a delivery and you can't really live your life. And I think it is affecting the podcast slightly. So I just want to flag that. But there's no way around it, sadly. And but my house is looking a lot better. I've got some outside furniture where the seats fold over and fold away, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing, but just wanted to flag that there. But before we get on to Cheatle, so I already wanted to talk about Kimberly Cheatle, but she has now resigned since we even started the podcast. It's a fast-moving world, guys. It's going to be almost impossible to do podcasts in future because everything is going to move so fast. So Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheatle has resigned. It's incredible how long it took her because she did that horrific testimony for the House Oversight Committee, including Nancy Mace firstly saying, well, that's bullshit, which I was stunned by because that doesn't happen in England. And then later she said, you're full of shit today. Just fully on set. And they were like, people like, hey, conduct in the house, or whatever. But they were, but that was very much the tone. They weren't even that bothered about what she said there because it was so bad. It was so bad. Some of the things that came out during this testimony were she had no radio recordings of the day. That was one. She was using personal devices that she probably shouldn't even be using. She claimed at one point sufficient resources were given to Trump. Obviously, on the face of it, completely false because he was shot. So it obviously wasn't sufficient, was it? It's a tautology, really. No precise timeline. She had no precise timeline of the day. So they're asking her questions, and they say, at 3:27 this happened. What about this? She's going, oh, I have no precise timeline. It's like, what? She said a report would be issued in 60 days. And everyone said, well, that's completely inadequate. That's insane. I mean, and she was only there because they'd subpoenaed her. She didn't want to be there. Nancy Mace really went for saying you're full of shit. But even AOC had a good question. She had a question about the range of an AR-15. And she's like, if these are the guns so often used in these attacks, why is the standard perimeter a shorter range than the range of this gun? So you're only saying, no, we're covering this amount, but actually you need it to cover this larger amount. And that was a good question from AOC. So even AOC is asking good questions. That's how mad American history is at this point. So it was an absolutely disastrous hearing. And you think, is she there to deflect from someone else? Is she the fall guy? Because she couldn't have wanted to go through that. I mean, that was another Succession moment of like Tom and Greg in front of the. By the way, quick little digression. I hate to have a go at Constantine, but he's posted that he hated Succession and couldn't even get through episode 1. That's so insane to me. That's to say that you don't care about language, comedy, drama, aesthetics, the world. You're barely a person. I mean, I've even said to Simon Evans, he hasn't watched Succession. I said, Simon, you're barely a person if you haven't watched it. But if you watched it and you don't like it, that's utter insanity. But it reminded me of that. She was up at this committee, completely inadequate, completely ill-prepared. Did she just desperately want to hold on to a job, or was she there to deflect and soak up pressure? What? Any thoughts, Toby?
Yeah, well, my impression is that she hadn't reconciled herself to the fact that she'd have to resign. She hoped she could cling on, and she thought that she could make a decent fist of withstanding the kind of cross-examination during the congressional hearing, testimony. Often when you're kind of in one of these situations when it's unclear whether you'll have to resign or not, I say this having been in that situation myself in January 2018, you end up making things far worse for yourself and having to humiliate yourself in various ways because you think you can cling on. And actually, in retrospect, you realize that had you gone straight away, it would have been far less painful. And I think it's something like that that's going on rather than she's the fall guy or had to, I mean, I think had she resigned the day after the assassination attempt, then she probably wouldn't have had to testify. And she's now going to be remembered for kind of, being grilled and failing to withstand the cross-examination and being bullied by people like, or being browbeaten by people like Nancy Mace, which isn't a great look. And it now looks as though she's had to resign because she was such a poor witness in her own defense. And she attempted to stonewall Congress and by extension the American people and wasn't properly contrite and didn't realize that she would be held to account. And, she's now resigning in disgrace, whereas, had she resigned the day after, there would have been some honor in that. But I think the reason she didn't resign straight away is because she thought she could hang on to her job. Now she's realized she can't, she now realizes she should have gone earlier.
Well, yeah, I mean, if that's the simple reason, then of course she should have gone earlier because it was always going to be brutal. It was so brutal. It was just everyone saying that you need to resign, you can't do your job, you put everyone at risk. I mean, someone died. Her attitude and her stonewalling, given that someone died, let alone the attack on Trump, it was so pathetic. There's always a chance it was just pure incompetence, DEI, just no one can do anything anymore. But you do wonder if there's something more going on. I mean, it's very, very strange. Trump, by the way, has just put out a Truth Social on this. He says, the Biden-Harris administration did not properly protect me, and I was forced to take a bullet for democracy. Caps. It was my great honor to do so. That took a few turns, didn't it, within that short post. So that is brilliant. There was a brilliant line that was trending with Trump when he was like, he goes, they say I'm a threat to democracy. I took a bullet for democracy. It's such a good line. And by the way, I watched the Trump speech in Michigan, and he was just back on such good form. It was unbelievably funny, back doing what he does best, which is being hilarious. It was so hilarious. There's one bit where he talks about his comb over. He goes, "Wow, that is a severe comb over. I just saw it on that screen. It's okay from here, but that is very severe. I apologize." It was almost like full like Will Ferrell. He said, "I apologize." I mean, that is absolutely hilarious.
Did you see that in is it Tucker Carlson's was it in Tucker Carlson's speech to the Republican convention? He described Trump as the funniest man I know. In private, incredibly funny, according to Tucker.
Yeah. Everyone who knows him says he's incredibly funny. And I've seen a few people say Trump's not funny. It's like the worst possible defense because he's obviously incredibly funny. Most of his enemies even admit it. Everyone who knows him privately says he's the funniest guy ever. And it was so many funny moments. There was the bit about the bullet was so funny. He goes, but ping, and he turns around. And he talks about the sign. He goes, the sign, the great sign. I love the sign. I might sleep with it tonight. He says he might sleep with the sign that saved him.
I'm gonna grab the sign to put
It's so funny. It is this Biden voice of like, Trump. It is this weird Biden voice that sounded like Dr. Evil. It was the whole speech is just, it was unbelievably funny. And even when he said Maganomics, he said Maganomics. It was so the way he said it. Honestly, I couldn't believe how funny he was just a few days after nearly being killed. It's unbelievable. But let me just ask you a few things about, while we're talking about Cheatle, about the shooter, Toby. So, yeah, I mean, it starts to look very, very bad. I mean, one thing that's very strange is why is the media so quiet about it? I mean, there are many possible explanations for that. But how much do you even know about it? I mean, I follow this stuff. I've not seen much in the mainstream media. Like, for example, the fact that he looked up Ethan Crumbley, who was a previous shooter, whose parents became liable because they had given him the gun. And this shooter, Crooks, looked up this Ethan Crumbley person on his phone because he was presumably worried about his parents. That's an interesting detail. But did we even know that detail? I had to find that out from Jack Posobiec talking to Tucker Carlson, which had so much interesting information in it. I mean, there's the drone. He went scouting out the place with a drone, which he just got away with. He had a bicycle, which we found out in the hearing, and a rucksack. Maybe it was already known. None of those things are allowed. You're not allowed bicycles. You're not allowed rucksacks at a Trump event. You're not allowed that thing. What's that thing he had as well? The scouting thing. The range. Yeah, the rangefinder. You're not allowed those. But he had all these. Yeah. He went and scouted everything out. He scouted out with the drone. He went back. Apparently, then asked for the gun from his dad, who thought he was going to the range. So he had a history of going to a range. But there's also, as Trump has pointed out, there's also encrypted numbers to foreign countries in his phone. So the question now is, was a foreign country involved, or was he just a loner? He had depressive disorder. He also had looked up a DNC convention. Was he a guy that would have happily had a pop at a Democrat as well? Did he just want to shoot at someone? I mean, why was he looking at the DNC convention? Another thing he said was on this, I think it's called Steam. It's some sort of streaming platform. Yes. He said July 13th will be my premiere. Watch it unfold. So there's all this, but most of these I had to get from Jack Posobiec. I haven't heard them from the mainstream media, and it does seem a remarkable lack of curiosity. Have you noticed that?
Well, I guess it's partly because the news is so fast moving. I mean, it's as though, a year's worth of news is happening every 24 hours in America at the moment. So it's impossible to kind of stay focused on any one thing. But I imagine in due course that, a lot of this stuff will come out and be properly assessed. But do you think this makes it? There's been talk of. Have you seen this talk about other shooters, like analysis of the sound the bullets were making? The suggestion is, in fact, that there wasn't just one shooter; there were three shooters.
Oh, you've heard three. I heard two.
The implication is that he was just a patsy. But my impression from listening to the testimony is that and the reason she couldn't answer the questions, didn't have a timeline, the reason she was trying to stonewall, I don't think it was because she was trying to kind of cover up a conspiracy or even cover up her own incompetence. I think it was just chaotic. It was just poorly organized. It was just the Secret Service is just breathtakingly incompetent from the top down. And that's why she didn't have any of that information, because it's going to take them months to kind of get it together. And in some cases, they won't be able to provide that information because they won't have recorded it. They don't have it. And that, to me, listening to her, suggested that the whole thing was a cock-up and not a conspiracy. It's just staggeringly incompetent from the top down.
It's certainly a possibility, but do you accept my critique that I just teased at the start of the show? Do you accept my critique that I already know what you're going to say and what James is going to say, and you've both said the same thing? James said it was all staged.
Well,
and therefore...
Well, did James... So what I hadn't actually heard what James had to say about it, but is his... My prediction is that he said the whole thing was staged, and that Trump is in fact controlled opposition, and it was staged by the kind of power elite to kind of create the false impression that Trump...
All right, that is the end of the free podcast for this week, but don't worry, there's still loads more podcasts. If you go to basedmedia.org and sign up for just £5 a month, that's the price of a pint in London or a posh coffee with loads of soy that you don't need. So basedmedia.org for the whole podcast, and you get Peak Woke, Base Department, all these great sections, and you help us keep going, pay all our staff, keep the lights on, keep this brilliant production going at basedmedia.org, and it's just £5. Thank you very much for the support, and we'll see you there.